like to jig really most times of the year. I think spring starts out, you're fishing a lot of jig shallow fish, specifically walleyes, right? They're up in cabbage, they're up in some of the developing weeds. Even as they work out to the next break, you're just fishing a little bit heavier jigs quite often to keep up with them. And whether it's live bait and then eventually moving to plastics, jigs are a great way to just put baits in front of fish. And then again in the fall, pitching jigs and plastics, specifically great big ones, is a super way to get bit. It's a tricky thing. For me, the simple rule of thumb is I fish the lightest jig that I can to mimic a really natural fall rate. However, I never let it get at the expense of being able to both feel the bait and then also being able to feel the bottom. If I can't feel the bottom or feel like I don't have control over the bait, there's very few situations in which I'll fish a jig head that light. So depending on your environment, heavy current areas, that could be a half-ounce jig. In areas where it's dead calm and you're fishing shallow water, that could mean a 16th ounce jig. Every situation is different, and never be afraid to try and retie. It's gonna lead to more fish getting that figured out. I'm pretty simple when it comes to color, yet my main rule is contrasting colors. I don't like fishing all the same color. Like for instance, if I'm fishing a black plastic, I don't like using a black or a dark jig head. I like mixing and matching colors because I feel that contrast and seeing a darker bait up against a lighter jig head or a darker jig head up against a lighter bait, it's going to provide that contrast. I think fish are going to be able to see it more easily. I know I can certainly see it in the water next to the boat much more easily. But when it comes to just standard colors and how I go, if I'm fishing clear water situations, I tend to be more natural, more browns than blacks. Black is a great sleeper color for so many different things. But for the most part, when I'm not fishing clear water, I'm using the exact opposite. I'm using brighter colors. Again, this contrast idea. I'm fishing a lot of chartreuse. Those orange, blaze orange, hot orange, lighter red colors are a go-to in those environments where rusties are in the water. So, I'm kind of all over the board, but depending on the situation, in clear water specifically, I'll try to match the hatch, be a little more natural, but in other conditions and situations, I'm going bright, or I'm trying to match rusty crayfish patterns. Man, there are so many jig styles out there. I can't say I religiously use every single one of them. I think there's a couple standouts that always, year in, year out, find their way into my box. Your average standard jig is great, especially if you're talking live bait, like a fireball with no collar. Short shank works wonderful for just early season jig and minnow presentations. Also works in the summer if you're doing some vertical stuff right over the top of them. If you're fishing bigger minnows, the long shanked varieties always have those for chubs, shiners. Stand-up jigs I tend not to use as much. Maybe rocky environments is when I use it the most. It's nice to get that bait to stand up and out of the rocks a little bit. I feel like they're slightly more weedless too for whatever reason. Then one that I use just a little bit is one with the weed guard. It's not very common, but I have just a couple in my box in case I'm fishing really weeds with heavy stalks or wood environments. So those are the main ones that I like to fish and why, but I'll tell you what, every jig and jig design is meant to serve a purpose. And maybe the last one I'll say is anything with a good wire keeper. If you're fishing plastics, a wire keeper is just absolutely essential. So I make sure that I've got that big, strong, aggressive keeper to make sure that I don't pull the plastic down the bait a ways.